It's time we give back. So we'll see and show someone where love's at. Even if you don't give a dime, give your heart and share your time. Help somebody else in life. Give back. Let's give back. Don't forget the children are our future.
Welcome back to another episode of Ignite, Empower, Transform. I'm your host, Larry Starke. On this show, we talk to individuals who take the time and educate themselves and bring some of that back to their communities. On today's show, we have the pleasure of talking to Dorrin Johnson via Skype in Atlanta. This should be an exciting interview. So Dorrin Johnson is our guest via Skype. You're in Atlanta, brother.
I'm in Atlanta.
Atlanta. How's the weather out there?
It's doing good. It's
Okay.
doing good.
Okay.
Doing good.
So your journey to Atlanta started in the Bronx.
It did. It did.
Okay. Where
Hometown.
Hometown. Where in the Bronx? I'm a Bronxite myself.
We started on a little street off of 174th Street. It's called Memphis Place. So that's where I was born. And then
Okay.
from Memphis, when I was probably in about 7th grade, we moved to Webster, which was a totally different experience. It was coming from like a little environment to like public housing.
I get it.
A bunch of us compact, that was a little tight. That was a little different. It was a different experience, but it was good. And a lot of good people at Webster. I learned a lot there. And then from Webster, my last stop when I was in high school was 180th and Southern Boulevard, actually Honeywell Avenue over in the West Farms area. So, that was my Bronx journey.
Okay. Well, what was it like growing up over there? Like, what kind of things were you into?
Just my big thing was always playing ball. I was very into ball, and I started with football. And ironically, I started with football. I used to play for a team way back in the day called the Road Runners, and we used to play in like what is it, like McCombs Park or McCombs Fields, like over by the old Yankee Stadium. And so I played football for a long time. But when I went into high school, I went to Lehman High School, and there's a lot of big Italian kids, and I was like, nah, I ain't gonna get smashed up like that. So I started playing ball a lot more. So ball became my thing.
Okay. So ball in high school. Did you scholarship to go to play in college, or did you just?
The thing is, I was supposed to play at Hofstra. So at Hofstra, I went to Hofstra. The coach that I was recruited by was Coach Berg. And my freshman year, I took a lot of remedial courses. I couldn't play, and that was supposed to change my sophomore year. So my sophomore year, and I did have a scholarship. So my sophomore year, he was fired. And he was fired, so I wasted like an entire year. And the new coach that came in, Van Bredikoff, he came in with 2 guards. So he came in with 2 guards, and one of them was a good friend at the time. And so he kind of had his offense set the way he wanted to, and it just wasn't going to work for me. So I was in school, found a way to stay in school, and I just concentrated on school.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's what it's about anyway, right? Trying to get your education by any means necessary. But we kind of skipped forward really swiftly. What I want to do is I want to talk about your upbringing in the Bronx. I know in conversation your mom was real active in the Bronx, in the community. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Well, I'll tell you, like the one thing that with my Bronx story, and I'm sure it pertains to a lot of people, and I always just try to be open with it, is my father was involved in like a lot of street life in New York, and was fairly successful in what he did. And so he was, murdered when I was 3, and that was just a crazy environment for us at that time. It was he left my mother with kids. He left a couple of other mothers with kids, and so my mother, she really had to struggle and hustle to kind of make things happen for us. So, I know a lot of other people there. That might be their story as well. But the one thing that she always did, whether it was Memphis Place, whether it was Webster Avenue, whether it was West Farms, was she always put an emphasis on education, and just try to get us and try to make us just know that was the answer. That's what she demanded, and she was trying to raise 2 sons, So unfortunately, and I'm very open with it. My older brother, he didn't make it. He was murdered as well, and he just gravitated to what he saw around him. and that was just who he was. So I know, even to this point, there may be some folks that are going to see this, and if it's anything that I give you, like, education is the way, and you can, if you see cats that you think are kind of, got some cake, or if you see cats that just nice with a ball, that's cool, but there's things that you can do with this as well. And I always want to give that to you. So for my experience, it was, like Jose had mentioned, gauchos, and, for like a brief second, I was going to try to play for Riverside, and that was kind of there. But, cats that I grew up with playing ball, it was just kind of our lifestyle. We were so focused on that. Right. And I don't even think it was an emphasis on, trying to get into college. I think it was just, you just love the game.
Yeah, just to love the game. You're out there trying to compete.
Yeah.
I got it.
And that's it. So, I can recall, like, the PL on Webster Ave. I don't even know if it still is there, but, my first team was. I believe
it is, actually.
Is it really?
Yeah, I believe it is, yeah.
Yeah, my first team was church, because I went to 158, for my middle school. That was around that side. And it was crazy because I was taking the bus from Webster all the way to 158 over and like down by like Freeman Street in that area, like Forest Project. So my first team that I ever played for was a church called St. Anthony. So it was Padua. So I remember that, and I remember Charlie Bradley. I never forget that. That was like my first coach. And I know, Charlie was an old cat at the time, so I know he's not alive, but, he just taught us a lot about just working hard and just fundamentals of the game. And that was when, I was a shorty, maybe like 9, 10, 11 years old. So, that was my experience. That was my foundation, and that carried through a lot of other things in my life that I still apply some of those things. And that's why I can recall Charlie, because he was a good coach.
Yeah, I mean, he was more than a coach when you think about it, because he instilled some things in you that you're carrying along today, and probably fostering those things in other people that you meet along the way.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So yeah, coaches are important. We actually did a segment about coaches and how they influence young minds and how important they are. I don't think people give them enough credit. Our local coaches, neighborhood coaches, they're regular people like you and I trying to educate us as we come along these paths.
Exactly.
I know we talked again. I'll keep saying that. When we were talking earlier, you were saying talking about your mom and having a street named after, and her being part of the Democratic Party, a club in the Bronx. That's important. Yeah. That's important to talk about.
Yeah. So my mother was one of those people that was always just active, and she just always, she went through a lot of personal struggles in her own life. So she, instead of just, I guess, allowing that to define her, she always reached out and tried to help other people. So she was always that person. My grandmother was that person when we was on Webster. She was that person that, like, you could always come to her apartment and get something to eat. Right. So they were always people that would just always try to do what's best for their community. So my mother used to do like bus rides to like Great Adventure and the Haunted Mansion back in the day, and she was just that person. So through that, somehow I just carried into just the community and wanting to do things for the community, and it became political. Okay. She became very active in politics in the Bronx. So she helped a lot of people, get into offices, and they showed her love, and they still show her love even to this day. So when you look at the street, named after her, like my first job out of college was I worked for Jose Rivera. Okay. And so now he was the councilman.
Hold that thought for me, because we want to take a break, and we want to come back to talking about that a little bit. We want to talk about the naming of the street and talk about your work with the councilman. So just hold that thought for a second.
Yeah. I'm your host, Rebecca Gavan. Tune in to Ignite and Power Transform every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. on BronxNet.
Give back. Let's give back.
So we're back with Dorrin Johnson via Skype in Atlanta. Dorrin, at the break, we touched on your mom having a street named after her and some of her political endeavors, and we're kind of going to roll into your connection with the Bronx Democratic Club. Let's talk about those three things a little bit.
Yeah, so my mother was very active in Bronx politics, and she just did a lot for a lot of people. She helped a lot of people get into office. And she passed about 6 years ago, and she just, she really transformed a lot there. And one of my first job out of college when I left Hofstra was I worked for Jose Rivera, who at the time was a council member, and now he's the assemblyman. And I just came up like a few weeks ago, and I was just spending some time with him. And so I learned a lot from Jose, and together they did a lot to kind of just transform. I was like a '70s kid in the Bronx, and when I was on Memphis Place, and just when you saw like the South Bronx at that time, it was like a war zone. And
I grew up in it. I know exactly what you're talking about.
There you go. So they worked hard to transform that. So, just as a result of things that she's done for a long time, the Bronx Democratic Club is called the Rosalind Johnson Democratic Club. And the street that we grew up on, my last street, which was in the West Bronx section, is called Rosalind Johnson Way. So that's a tremendous honor, and she was a good one.
Okay, yeah, we have a little connection here because I grew up over on Hoe and Vice. I lived over there for a while. So I know your area very well.
Yeah.
We used to run from over there and head to the Bronx Zoo, and so I'm very familiar with your stomping grounds. I remember walking through all those abandoned buildings. When I tell people when they see that movie South Bronx, I say that actually is how it was. That's not the movie theater. That's not a movie set. We did have just what you see in that movie.
Exactly.
So it's crazy. So I grew up around the same time you did. I got it all, and it's amazing to see what it's converted to now. It's been gentrified. Well, it's being gentrified as we speak. You'd be surprised at what you see walking through the Bronx streets now. It's something you never thought you would see unless you were in maybe like Westchester Square. But so all right. So you had your connection to the Democratic Club in the Bronx, and you went on from that point. Did that help you? I guess I should say, did that influence your political views?
There were two people. One was Jim Wilson, and Jim worked for the Board of Education in New York, and he was just always around. He's a good man, and he was a Black Republican, and so he would just always talk about ideas and things to that effect of the party, and I know Van Jones, which was Sylvia's restaurant. Her son, he was involved in that party, and as my mind started shifting more towards business and I guess just entrepreneurialism and just kind of.
I'm sorry. Let me for one second. When you say Van Jones, you talk about Van Jones we see on TV now?
No. I mean Sylvia's. Sylvia's son. So just from that standpoint, like just being an entrepreneur and just kind of controlling your destiny, like those things started coming in my head. And when I met Fred Brown, who was like the head of the New York State Black Republican Party at that point. Not that my views of helping people change, but I think my avenue in terms of trying to get there to help people change. And I started kind of just looking at things a little differently. So, that's one of the things that I miss so much about my mother not being here, because we would constantly debate about how, we were going to, just do things to empower, people who were disenfranchised. And so we had different ways that we thought we could get there. But at the end of the day, the mission was still there to just try to help folks that needed help, and that still exists to this day.
When you say you guys had a debate, and are we speaking from two separate parties? Is that what you mean by that, or just an overall debate? Because the reason I asked that is because there's this climate. It's been a climate. It's been the thought in my upbringing and my community's upbringing that if you're Black, you should be a Democrat, and that's it. Democrat. So when you hear Black Republican, it's always a frown put on. I happen to have educated myself a little bit, so I know it's really not a reason to put a frown on your face. But I say all this to say, you don't have many Black men or women who will introduce themselves as Republicans, and I think it's important that we start educating people on the party being more about an idea as opposed to the people.
Exactly, and I'll tell you this. What people don't realize is when we look at, like, just even in our experience in this country, with the folks that was hanging us folks that didn't want us to go to schools, and folks that was beating us with clubs, they were all Democrats.
Absolutely.
And that's what folks don't realize. And so the Republican Party was always a party that, African American people in this country embraced. Now, I think the party's been hijacked. Clearly, it's been hijacked. You got like someone that I just do not agree, who clearly is not in that position because he should be in that position. It's not based on who he is as an individual. It's just based on him playing into fears of other people. So as a result, I became an independent. After being in that party for about 20 some odd years, I became an independent. But I think at the end of the day, when I look at, I just think we just need to embrace people as people. And when I look at, Jose's been, when I look at, now he's Assembly Member Jose Rivera, he's been very influential in my life, from a young man that was like 21 to, I just saw him not too long ago. And he's always been a champion for trying to fight for the rights of folks in the Bronx and in Puerto Rico as well. And so when you look at that, you can't, I think we need to look beyond just, if you're red or you're blue or anything like that, and just look at, where we are. And that's like a mission of who I am. It's a mission of my lovely wife, and the things that we hope to do, as individuals. Is something that we instill in our children. And I think that's what's most important, when we can kind of get, behind, beyond just, parties, and just try to really just embrace like a mission. And that mission should be to uplift ourselves, but also to uplift people in the process.
So do you find your conversations or your presentation as an independent being heard by either party, or do you feel like one party is viewing you differently? I mean, how does it feel to be? I'm registered as a Democrat, but my views, well, and I've registered as a Democrat because that's what family said you're supposed to be. But as I've gone on and gained experience and educated myself on different areas, just in life in general, I realized that not all Democrats have my best interest at hand, just like not all Republicans, just like no man or woman. I have to make a decision based on what I'm hearing. How are you dealing with that as an independent?
Well, I'll tell you, I just think that just when you look at the climate of our country and where the climate of our country is going, especially when you look at a lot of people are not really tapping into young people. And, I've been blessed that I have like nieces and nephews that are millennials, and even my daughter's a millennial. So when I look at their mindset is atypical of parties. They're not even into the party thing. And I think that when you look at on both sides, when you look at, the right, they're just pulling so far right and allowing people to do that they totally just are not hearing the voice of what's going to come. When you look at on the left side of it, they are so far left that they're not looking at, folks in the middle. And when we look at just from a demographic standpoint of where our country is moving, it's moving more towards a liberal stance, and just by the numbers, it will be that way. But it's not moving to a liberal position where folks want to be dependent, and where folks want, I guess the current base of the ruling party of both parties to determine where they want to be. Okay. Their ideas are different, their views are different, the way that they see the world is different, and that will be what is prevalent in our country. And and when either side just is not paying attention to what is clearly happening in front of you, in my opinion, I think you will see just the rise of a party, and that party might be like independence, but you'll just see people that will identify with people that kind of are in the middle, and that's been going on both sides, and I think that's where we go.
I want to agree with you on that. I think, and even going back a little bit to what you said and talking about the millennials, I think that's going to be the most important part. Those young men and women are going to, they're going to influence the way politics is run. I don't, like you said, they don't have a dependence or on either one. They are going with the way they're taught, the way they see the world, and it's going to flip it all the way upside down. I'm going to pause on that thought for a second, because I do want to touch on your professional endeavors, but I want to take a break, get another commercial in here, and then we'll come back and talk a little more about where you are, and what the things you've done in terms of your work, your actual employment.
Okay, cool.
All right,
That works.
And we'll be back
Okay.
in a second.
Your son wants to get a cat, but you're allergic.
Maybe it could be an outdoor cat that lives in our neighbor's yard, 3 doors down.
Mom.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Teens in foster care will love you just the same.
So we're back with Dorrin. Again, we're Skype. We're via Skype. He's out in Atlanta. We're here in rainy New York. It has been horrible since morning. It's been pouring down, and there's no give, and it's cold. So
Yeah.
we just been having this crazy weather. Anyway, this is not about New York and the New York weather. This is about you and who you are and what you're doing for yourself, for your family, for your community. All these things are very important. So take me through your timeline in terms of your career and your family and things you've done. And I'll jump in where I see fit. I just want you to just kind of just take the wheel and give me some information about you.
Okay, so I'll tell you, when I finished Hofstra, when I graduated from Hofstra, I went to work for Jose, and I went to Hofstra for psychology. I thought I wanted to be a counselor, and I had plans on going to grad school. So I went back and I started working in that profession back, in West Farms. Actually, I lived in Queens at the time with my wife, and it was just hard for me to kind of shut it down. I tried family counseling for a little bit. So I'm this young cat straight out of college, just trying to counsel folks there. And that was just hard. And then I started doing child counseling, in the Bronx and primarily in the West Farms community. And you're trained to kind of detach from, what you hear. So, I found myself taking the Q44 home, instead of taking the train, because I just had to just kind of bring it down like every day, because I was hearing these stories that I just couldn't detach from, and it just became very heavy. So at the time, I was still relatively in shape, and I said, so what am I going to do? So I became, I just realized that was not, the path that I needed to follow. So I became a person that was a personal instructor, in health clubs. And just through it, I was approached by the club manager saying, listen, I like the way you talk to your clients. Would you consider, selling memberships here? And at the time I worked in the city it was called La Raquette, which was in the Park Meridian Hotel. And so I started selling there. I started selling memberships there, and that just opened me up to a path of sales. And that's how I kind of got on that side of it, and just in terms of speaking to people. So I have friends that, from the Bronx that, were involved in music, and, just everybody's in the Bronx trying to do beats or rap or whatever it was. And, I had one friend in particular, Mike, and I still talk to him to this very day. I just talked to him not too long ago. And he had a meeting at some record companies, and it was like, D, come with me. You can talk to people. And I'm like, wait, just talk. You know how to talk to people. And I'm like, so, just went there, and, we were able to close the deal. Because I was a sales cat, so I knew how to close deals. So we closed deals, and that opened up just an environment with not only him, but other folks that I eventually started managing as a manager of record producers.
Okay.
So that was, that opened up that side of it. So, and me saying that.
Let's not gloss over that a minute, because too quickly, because I've not heard of that. A manager of record producers. So I didn't know that was even a position that exists. That exists. And the reason I say that is because, we know there's a lot of young kids that think music is the way for them, and they may not all be the best rapper or singer, but there's another avenue that they didn't think. They may not produce, but maybe they can manage producers. So what did that job entail briefly?
Basically, at the end of the day, my job is to get songs placed. So if my guys are just doing beats or, tracks or songs or whatever, either they might be working with a songwriter. It might be an established songwriter where that's all they do. They write songs and they get them placed on a Beyonce album or a Jay-Z or whatever it may be. But from that standpoint, my job is to take that material and to get it placed. And I kind of got a little niche with it where, if I would, find like an artist that I knew was in the studio, like some cats, like Busta would be in the studio all the time. And you come in there like, yo, try this, write to it, and he's like, oh, yo, this is hot. More than likely he's going to buy it.
Gotcha.
So I found a little niche at how if I place my stuff with established people, if it's fire, they're going to find a way to make it fire on a record, and then, my job is to get those songs placed on albums, and I was relatively successful doing that.
Okay. Okay. Is this something you still do today, or did you move on from
No,
that?
no, and I'll tell you this. I had a friend here who was actually drafted by the Falcons, and he was the 7th pick in the draft, and I did some stuff for him off the field. So he was making, just as much or more money off the field, 7th pick in the draft, and that caught the attention of other people. So just where I am as a person, I never, put down my faith. I'm a strong believer in Christ, and I look at just my life and how He's moved it, and that's so important to me. So I was actually in New York, and my daughter was maybe like 1 year old, and I was at a video shoot with some very popular rappers up there. We was in Harlem, and just a lot of things were pulling me in terms of where I felt like my spiritual path was going, and then kind of what I was doing in the music business, so long story short, one of the guys that I was there with, he had just gone platinum, and he had a platinum party. And it used to be called Metronome. I don't know what it is now, but it used to be Metronome. And I would always stay at the West End on 8th Ave, or I think it's 8th Ave and 46th Street or something like that. So, I'm there, and just something breaks out in the front, and I'm trying to get it squashed between, the cops that are doing security, right, and, like these established, hip hop cats. And, so I got it squashed, and, they didn't want to let him in his platinum party because of the fire, the capacity. So, I got it all worked out, and, they're going in, and as they're going in, I say, listen, I'll catch y'all later. And they're like, D, you ain't coming in? I'm like, nah, I'm good. I'll see y'all later. And I walked from Broadway and 21st Street or 18th Street or whatever,
Okay.
to back to my hotel, 4 in the morning or something like that. And then it was just I can't do this no more. So I left, and I just called and said, listen, I can't do that no more. So it's not a bad thing about just music. And I think music is a beautiful thing, and I love it. Right. But I just felt like God was moving me in a different direction with where I needed to be the person that I am now. And it was the best decision that I made for myself at that time. Now, I still got a lot of cats that I will give advice to and try to help do deals here and there. But in terms of me being in that anymore, that's not who I am. Okay,
so I mean, you led into you talked about how this led you to your faith, and I want to talk about that. Mm-hmm. Sorry, you talk about how this led into your faith. I want to talk about that because one of the things that I've discovered in me trying to explore faith and church and all those things is that Black men get put down more by Black men, other Black men, I should say, for being involved in churches. There's this stigma that goes around like every pastor's a thief or a pimp. And I think that's important that Black men start to talk about this, because I have my view on what I see the church as and even what I see God as. But I think that's something we could have a long conversation on. But what I'm going to need to do, though, is I'm going to take another break from this segment, and we'll try and come back and talk a little more about that.
Okay, cool.
See what I mean? I told you all this was going to be an exciting show. Dorrin had some great insight on a whole lot of things, and unfortunately, we couldn't cover it all in this segment. So what we do ask you to do is visit us on YouTube. Just do a search for Ignite, Empower, Transform, and you'll find this show and the segment that we were unable to air. Please go see us, subscribe, and hit that little bell so you'll know when we post new information or new videos, and join us. Thank you very much for joining us for this session of Ignite, Empower, Transform.